The cycle of poverty makes people poor. It traps people in a vicious cycle, depriving them of the necessary opportunities to escape their circumstances. It reinforces the idea that their situation is hopeless and there is nothing they can do to change it. Poverty can be brutal to avoid, but it takes time and patience to resolve. Listen up. This video will answer the question: how the cycle of poverty makes people poor in 2023. Number 1. Lack of good and quality education. In 2023, lack of good and quality education is one of the leading causes of poverty. A good education is one of the most critical factors of being successful. A good education makes getting a good job and making money more accessible. Parents who don't have enough money to send their children to school are forced to send them to work instead. This is because they cannot afford to buy food for the family, pay their medical bills, or even pay for electricity at home. Unfortunately, this means that these kids will not be able to get a good education like those who have enough money do have. They can't get jobs, and they can't help their families get out of poverty. And without an education, these kids will also end up being poor when they grow up. This means that many people in poverty need the skills or knowledge to get out of it. Number 2. Living in low-income areas. Poor people tend to get poorer because they live in low-income areas. These areas have less money available for businesses and public services, which means fewer jobs that pay well. There is also less investment in education and other resources that help people get ahead. For example, some schools may need more teachers or books or supplies for all students. This can mean that children who grow up in these areas will have less education than those who grow up in wealthier neighborhoods. The poorest people live in rural areas, which are statistically shown to have higher crime rates and lower educational attainment than urban areas. In addition to these factors, living in an environment with less access to resources such as food and healthcare can make it difficult for families to make ends meet. Number 3. Low-paying jobs. The cycle of poverty is a vicious cycle, and one thing that keeps people stuck in it is low-paying jobs. In 2023, low-paying jobs have increased. As a result, many people cannot earn enough money to escape poverty. There are many reasons why people wind up in low-paying jobs. Maybe they don't have any skills or can't afford to go to school. They may need to be qualified for something better. But whatever the reason, it's hard for people to get out of a cycle of poverty when their jobs don't pay enough for them to support themselves and their families. The consequences of this aren't just financial. People stuck in lower-paying jobs suffer from higher levels of stress and depression than those who aren't. This makes it even harder for them to escape poverty and climb the ladder toward financial stability. Number 4. Unhealthy environment. Poor people often face challenges that make it harder to escape poverty. One of the biggest challenges is the environment in which they live. Poor people often live in neighborhoods with more pollution, which can limit their ability to stay active and healthy. They live in areas that are not clean or safe. They must worry about environmental toxins, dirty air and water, and dangerous animals like mosquitoes and ticks. Unhealthy environments can make people sick, depressed, and unable to get around or do their jobs well. People who are ill or depressed don't have the energy or motivation to succeed in getting out of poverty. Mental illness makes it even harder for people to work effectively, so they're less likely to be able to pull themselves out of poverty with their efforts alone. Number 5. Lack of resources. Lack of resources is one of the most significant factors that keep people in poverty, including lack of access to food, shelter, clothing, and healthcare. A lack of resources is linked with a lack of opportunities. Poor people are less likely to get out of poverty because they have different access to education or job skills than wealthier people. If you grew up poor, you might not have had access to few resources. This means you only had a little money, good food, or a place to live. The cycle of poverty is that if you grow up in poverty, you are more likely to stay poor as an adult. This is because when you grow up with little or no resources, it's hard to get out of the state where you were raised. Number 6. Lack of opportunities. One of the most significant factors that make people poor is a lack of opportunities. While there are many ways to escape poverty, It's often difficult to take advantage of them if you have access to them in the first place. For example, suppose you don't have the opportunity to get an education. You cannot afford higher education because you don't make enough money, so your chances of getting ahead are limited. In that case, getting a job that pays well enough to lift yourself out of poverty is tough. The cycle of poverty creates a need for more opportunities for people. This is especially true when it comes to education and work. In many areas, there needs to be more schools or jobs available for people trying to escape poverty and move toward financial stability. This makes it difficult for people living below the poverty line to progress toward financial stability. Number 7. Lack of financial planning and education. In 2023, the lack of financial planning and education is one of the common reasons why people are poor. Poor people don't plan their finances. They don't plan how much they earn, what they spend it on, and how much they have left over. Suppose you don't have a solid financial plan and don't know how to manage your money. In that case, spending everything you earn on rent and bills is easy, leaving nothing for savings. This can leave you caught in a cycle where you never have enough for emergencies or unexpected expenses. Hence, you resort to high-interest loans or payday lenders who charge high fees. People must also have access to accurate information about budgets, investing, and retirement planning. Many people need to be taught these topics in school or by their parents, so they need outside resources to learn these skills. A good financial plan will help you prepare for these situations and prevent them from happening in the first place. Number 8. Increased crime and violence. The cycle of poverty has been around for many years, and it has helped to create a cycle of violence, crime, and more poverty. We all know that crime is a significant problem in every country today. Many crimes occur daily, including homicide, rape, robbery, and assault with a deadly weapon. Each of these crimes can lead to more violence, which causes more crime and puts more people at risk of being hurt or killed. People who don't have stable housing are also vulnerable to being victims of violence. They might be robbed or assaulted when they're sleeping outside or walking around during the day looking for food or shelter. Crime and violence are rising because people living in poverty find it hard to get jobs and have no other way to make money except by stealing or selling drugs. Number 9. Exposure to alcohol and drugs. Studies show that kids who grow up in poverty are more likely to be exposed to alcohol and drugs at a young age. This is because their parents exposed them to alcohol and drugs when they were young. When people are exposed to alcohol and drugs at a young age, they are more likely to become addicted or dependent on these substances when they grow up. Substance abuse can increase the likelihood of criminal activity and poor decision-making. Exposure to alcohol and drugs can lead to poverty. Some poor people may turn to drugs or alcohol to escape their situation. This can lead to spending money on these substances instead of necessities like food and rent, making it harder for them to run their status. This mentality does nothing but reinforces the idea that if you're poor, it's because you deserve it. Therefore, it's harder for those struggling financially to build up the confidence needed to overcome their circumstances. It takes more than just money to break this cycle. It takes an investment in people and their communities to ensure that every child has access to quality education and resources so they can grow into adults with the skills they need to compete in today's job market. Share your story in the comment section below. Like and subscribe to this channel. Click this fantastic video over here.